Instinctively, I think we know that, someone coming out with no supports, nothing to eat, kind of a perfect storm. You know what? St. Leonard's is one of London's best kept secrets, I think. I think it's important to realize that the people that are coming to St. Leonard's, for example, these are people that have served their time, and they're people that are going to be in our community, regardless of whether or not they're being supported. You can have accountability and compassion coexisting.
Hello, London. I'm Matt Brown, and you're listening to the Matt Brown Podcast. It's the show about all things local and maybe some other stuff too. Today, we're going to take a look at an organization with a long history here in London. You probably know the name, St. Leonard's Society, but you might not know what they do right here in our community. Their executive director is going to join us to tell us all about it right after this.
Winter's here. It's time to discover the Bicycle Cafe. Cozy up with our daily soup and sandwich, or unwind with an evening latte and Dutch comfort food. London Bicycle Cafe at the Forks of the Thames. See you soon.
Maybe you're familiar with the term hiding in plain sight. In other words, something is right in front of our nose, but it blends in so well that we don't even see it. That's often the case with the programs and services that St. Leonard's Society provides. Today, you're going to hear about terms like halfway houses, jail and prison, parole and probation, and how the organization supports people as they take responsibility for their actions and transition from incarceration back to living in our community after serving time for a criminal conviction. You're going to hear about some upstream prevention measures they provide too. So that's the background, and St. Leonard's Society Executive Director Michael Oates is here to tell us all about it. So let's go. Michael, welcome to the Matt Brown Podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me on, Matt. I'm thrilled to be here.
So let's jump right in. St. Leonard's Society. What kind of work does your team do? Who do you serve?
So we serve folks across the lifespan, from youth to adults. Typically, it's people that are either involved in the justice system or they're at risk of being involved. So, we work with folks that are unhoused and perhaps persistent or chronically homeless. They may not be involved in justice, but the risk is there. So we try and make sure that they don't become justice involved. And then, of course, we work with people that are involved with the justice system and need some support in getting back on track.
Okay, right on. And I expect that we'll talk a little bit more about the work that you do to support folks who are experiencing homelessness here in London. It's amazing. This podcast has been running since the end of June 2025. And in almost every, not every, but in almost every episode that we run, there is a link to homelessness and addiction. These are, big things happening here in London and right across Ontario.
For sure.
So I did some research. We've had chats before. You work within the criminal justice system, whether that's prevention or as a result of a person being involved in the criminal justice system. For context, a lot of us get our, I think, legalese from American television. I think it might help if our listeners understand some differences between jail and prison or probation and parole, and where does St. Leonard's fit into the mix?
Sure. So I'll answer the second part first because it's easier. So St. Leonard's, we see both probation and parole, and both jail and prison. In the Canadian context, when you hear someone talk about jail, that's normally a provincially run institution. And when you hear someone talk about prison, that means it's federally run, so it's run by the federal government. And the dividing line for our purposes is 2 years. Anything that is 2 years plus a day becomes federal. It becomes a prison sentence. Anybody that's serving time that's less than 2 years, they're in a provincial jail, and then they have the potential to be involved with probation. So provincial probation. If you're in prison, then you have the potential to apply for parole. And St. Leonard's will see folks at both ends of that spectrum.
Okay. And here in London, folks will be surprised to learn that you run a number of halfway houses. It sounds complicated. How do they work? Can you boil it down to its simplest form?
So a halfway house is it's the transition point. So somebody that's been in a prison or perhaps in jail, and they are making the transition back to the community. In some cases, they will come to a halfway house first. And what the idea of the halfway house is it gives folks a bit of extra time to make that transition back. Our focus is always on community safety. So trying to keep the community safe, trying to make sure that as people are making that transition back, that they understand sort of what's expected of them, what they will often be released with what are called release conditions. So they may have things that they can or can't do. And we try and sort of put those guardrails in place so that the transition back to the community is more successful. Sometimes that means that we are helping them get connected with other supports that they might need. So maybe they need support finding housing, which we've talked about, or maybe it's health or mental health supports. They might need assistance in getting a job or completing education, sort of building some of those skills that will help them be more successful. And we put all those supports around them to try and make sure that they are able to make that transition back to the community in a way that is meaningful and safe.
Okay. So really, it could go one of two directions. You're in a halfway house and you could breach some of those conditions. A severe breach might result in an individual being back in incarceration and out of the halfway house. Hopefully, they're moving along a continuum towards reintegration into our community. You must track numbers. Do you have a success rate that you can tell our listeners?
Yeah, sure. Typically, the people that are able to successfully complete their parole without breaching their conditions is about
Wow.
92%,
Okay.
which is fairly impressive. And like I said, those conditions, they can be things about, who are they able to associate with, or where are they able to go? Are they allowed to use electronic devices like computers and phones and those types of things? And then if we look at the number of folks that come out of a prison, stay at a halfway house, and then go back to community and don't commit any further crimes, those numbers are around 97%. So really quite good success rates. I think a part of that, Matt, if you look at the types of crimes that people are committing, them about half of crimes are made up of about five different conditions. One is theft, impaired driving, assault, and then breaching probation conditions. Those make up almost half of the types of criminal offenses that we see over the course of a year.
Okay, well, those are phenomenal numbers. I mean, if you're talking about 92, 97% success rate, it's over 9 out of 10 individuals that your organization provides programming for, serves, find success. And I think that's what I think that a society would expect, because there's an investment that's being made here, which we'll talk about a little bit later. I'm sure it's a pretty good bang for the buck. So St. Leonard's operates these halfway houses. Generally speaking, can you give us a sense, like, are they located in kind of one area in the city? How many do you operate? How many folks might be on parole that you're serving in this way?
I was having a conversation with one of our elected officials some time ago, and I mentioned that we ran four halfway houses in the city, and they were shocked to learn that there are four halfway houses in London. And I think that that's actually a good sign. I mean, I think that speaks to, what we were just talking about in terms of the success rate and the effort that we take to keep people safe. We do a heck of a good job. Those four halfway houses, they're in all different spots of the city. In some cases, they're right within a neighborhood. I mean, if you were to look at it from the outside, looks like a house. Several of them.
In terms of the number of individuals that you might be serving any given time?
So in total, we've got 50 beds across those four houses. And of those 50, 37 would be folks that are on parole.
We talked about your pretty phenomenal success rate. Let's talk cost. I think in the past you've told me that it's pretty expensive to keep somebody in jail or in prison, somewhere between $150,000, $175,000 a year, compared to what the work that you do. How's that compared to housing someone in a halfway house?
Yeah, the cost of the community support, like the halfway houses that we run, it's about a third, or slightly less than a third of what it costs to keep someone
Wow.
in a federal prison. And I mean, those are similar numbers for provincial jails. Of course, in provincial jails, we also struggle with the issues around overcrowding and space and so on. So a halfway house provides a great way to do things in a cost-effective way, but also in a way that is perhaps a bit more compassionate, or provides a bit of a better environment for the people that are serving time.
Yeah, I can certainly understand that and really sort of put it into perspective. Instead of $150,000 a year, it might be closer to $50,000 a year, one third the amount. Pretty impressive figure as well. I was speaking with a senior leader with London Police Service this past year. We were talking about the homelessness crisis, and he identified a contributing factor that I hadn't even considered. And that's a person that is being released from the Exeter facility, and they find themselves out in community, maybe with a bus ticket and maybe with a couple of bucks in their pocket, but then they make their way downtown and they're instantly homeless. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's not isolated just to like the detention center here nearby. That can we can see the same thing from folks that are being released from federal prisons. Once their release date comes, they are let go out the front door, and in some cases, they have no place to go, and they are experiencing homelessness.
Versus a person who transitions into a halfway house, has the time to develop the kind of community supports that they might need, which I'm sure includes housing. And maybe we can talk about that right now. So even the successful transfer from prison or jail into community, much higher success rate if you're involved in a program like the ones that you offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean it's all due to the efforts of the staff working within St. Leonard. So we have a whole team with the it's called a reintegration program. And those are the types of issues that they're trying to address with people coming out of the local detention center. They are trying to get them linked with housing. We think about things like food security, making sure that they have something to eat, making sure that they're getting connected with those mental health supports or health supports that they may require. I mean, and I mean, instinctively, I think we know that, someone coming out with no supports, nothing to eat, when you're dealing with that type of situation, that's a kind of a perfect storm for a risk of reoffending and basically ending back there, right?
Yeah,
So,
it's funny, Michael, that you say that. I honestly, I couldn't believe it when I heard that a person's just sort of, you walk out the front door, you might have a
yep.
bus ticket, you might have a couple of bucks, you really don't have a chance whatsoever. And so I think that's important for listeners to be aware of as well. And I also wanted to ask you, before
Mhm.
we run out of time here, is that in the news we often hear about being more tough on crime. That as a society we don't need to hug a thug, we need to be tougher. And I wonder what your thoughts from your perspective are on that.
Right. I think it's important to realize that the people that are coming to St. Leonard's, for example, these are people that have served their time, and they're people that are going to be in our community, regardless of whether or not they're being supported or not. One of the key values that St. Leonard's holds is around accountability, and I think sometimes people think that being compassionate means you're ignoring all the things that have happened in the past, and I mean we're coddling people and so on, but accountability, I mean that's not, you can have accountability and compassion coexisting. So we make sure that people understand that the crimes that they've committed, they have caused harm, whether it's to the community or to other people. And we take what's called a restorative approach. And that means that we hold people accountable for what they've done and then ask them to take steps that are meaningful and sometimes pretty hard to repair the harm that they have caused. We have seen people that come to us sitting in a room, across the table from the person that they have harmed, and listening to what that person has to say and what that event meant to them and what they need to make things right. And I mean, honestly, sometimes that can be harder than the actual time that they may have spent in jail.
I can totally understand that. The right thing to do is well, in so many ways. Well, maybe we can just hone in on that. Maybe you've got a story or two about specific situations where that's happened in your facilities with the work that your team does.
Success looks a little bit different for everyone, Matt. We had a man that came to us while he was in prison. He started collecting poetry that inmates were writing, and some of it was very raw. It was very real, and really like didn't pull any punches about what their experiences were. And once he came to us, one of the things that he started working on was he wanted to publish a book of this poetry, to start sharing some of those stories. By the time he left us, he had published two and was in the process of publishing his third book of poetry by inmates. And along the way, he had found employment, and he was actually working in a leadership
Is that
position
right?
at a very well-known, national store that you and I probably have been in at some point in the past. Made a lot of reparations. Went back to his to the community that he's living in, and has worked on repairing those relationships. Another individual that we were supporting came from the Indigenous community, and while he was in prison, he decided that he wanted to make links back to his community and start realizing sort of some of those cultural practices that he had never really embraced before. And he started doing workshops around sort of what that meant for him. He did workshops with our staff, but also back in his community. And it's those types of things. Like, those are two examples. We have other examples of people that have made connections back to their church. And quite frankly, a lot of the times it's back with family and repairing those relationships. And success looks a little different for each of them.
Yeah, I can totally understand that, and I can see how the services provided by your organization, by living in a halfway house for a period of time and being supported in the ways that you need to be supported. As you said, everyone is an individual, can help provide space for those types of repairs to occur, for that type of growth to occur. Maybe we could use this platform just as an opportunity for you to communicate to anybody listening to the podcast. Is there anything that you wish that people better understood about the work that you and your team does each and every day?
Matt, I think one thing that I would say is, I wish that people understood better that no one chooses to become involved with the justice system. One of my colleagues is fond of saying that we're all one bad decision away from becoming justice involved ourselves. And we all make
Right.
bad decisions. I have made my share of them along the way, and that doesn't mean that we can't take accountability for the decisions that we make. And people can show incredible strength when they are given the support and the permission to get that second chance. As much as justice and involvement is not one of those things that people want to that it doesn't you don't create a swell of empathy and compassion for people that are involved in the justice system. But you know what? I mean, the work that our teams do is truly a benefit to our community. And I think if we could all take a moment just to sort of have some compassion, not only for the individuals that are receiving services, but the individuals that are providing it. It's tough work. It's really hard work, but they show up every day with compassion and accountability and welcoming all comers, because we see the value in everyone's humanity.
I can believe that to be true, and I think that it doesn't make it okay. However, each situation is complicated, and often, more often than not, mired in poverty, in addictions, in mental health, in breakdown in family and in relationships, and just increases the probability of a person making a bad decision. And so why don't we finish off where we started? You run some pretty incredible programs downstream to address reintegration into community. But why don't we talk prevention just before we go?
Oh, that'd be amazing. Yeah, so prevention, I mean, it starts early. So we have folks that are working with youth across Middlesex County, actually. They may be youth that are identified by teachers, and they ask us to come in and help classrooms that are experiencing conflict, or individual students, and help them build skills that they can develop better relationships with. We work very closely with both our local and regional police and our courts through what are called diversion programs. So rather than sending somebody to an overcrowded jail, they may come to us, and we will work with them early on to try and help them course correct so that they stay out of the justice system.
Let's talk a bit about that. So they've already made a bad decision, maybe, and instead of incarceration, the police service, I imagine the Crown would come to organizations such as yours and say, "All right, let's find a diversion program." So tell us a bit more about what those might look like, and also the populations that they serve. Is this just for young people, or is this for a broader spectrum?
So it's for a broad spectrum. We certainly see it more with youth than we do with adults. But for the past 5 years or so now, I want to highlight the London Justice Centre. So that's a partnership amongst a number of different organizations. St. Leonard's being one of them. We have dedicated crowns. We've got a justice that is sort of really engaged in the whole idea of diversion and finding alternate ways of supporting people. And just to kind of give you an idea, the first year in operation, and these are statistics that were tracked by our folks working on the justice side of things. We avoided 5,000 probation hours and over 800 court appearances, avoided just by getting people through a diversion program. And over 60% of the people that we saw, they needed to be connected with mental health supports. Education was a big one. Food security was another one. Like just, I mean, think about what that means, right? I mean, 1,800 fewer jail days at our local detention center. Incredible savings, but I mean, these are now people that actually have the support that they need to avoid, further involvement with justice. So if you intervene early, you can prevent a lot of the things that would lead someone to have to come to a halfway house.
We've got about a minute left. Is there something that you wanted to communicate that I didn't ask about and that you want our listeners to know?
You know what? St. Leonard's is one of London's best kept secrets, I think. A lot of people have heard the name, but probably don't know a lot about what we do. If you're curious, reach out, ask. We've got hundreds of people that would be happy to talk to you about the work that we do and to share some of those amazing success stories.
Okay, well, let's leave it right there. Listen, Michael, it's been great having you on. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Matt Brown podcast. And thanks to you and your team for what you're doing each and every day.
Matt, thank you so much for letting me share some of their stories and recognizing these amazing humans that I get to work with every day.
And we'll be back to close out the show right after this.
Winter is here. Time to discover Bicycle Cafe. Cozy up with our daily soup and sandwich, or unwind with an evening latte and Dutch comfort food. London Bicycle Cafe at the Forks of the Thames. See you soon.
Okay, London, that's the show. I hope you liked it, and I hope you know a little bit more about what the hundreds of employees at St. Leonard Society do right here in our community than you did a half an hour ago. Thanks to Michael for joining us. He provided us with a rare window into what happens behind the scenes as an individual transitions from being incarcerated to returning to living in our community. I certainly see the value of the work that they do, and maybe you do too. This podcast continues to grow. As the downloads climb, I want to thank you for being a part of this journey. This podcast is for you. In fact, I couldn't do it without you. So let's keep that momentum going. Please keep your suggestions and pitches for future shows coming. You can reach me at the mattbrownpodcast@gmail.com. And if you like what you're hearing, please give the show a follow wherever you get your podcasts and share it on your socials with your family, colleagues, and friends. So that's the show. I'm Matt Brown, and you've been listening to the Matt Brown Podcast. Thanks for that. Bye for now. Keep in touch and talk to you again soon.